All right, welcome. We're going to try and do this as a paired thing. A little bit about us. I've been at Michigan State now for 25 plus years. Aditya is my student, so what I'm going to show here, he obviously did all the work. Right? He's part of IO Active when he's not being a student. And with that, let's go into this. The real emphasis here is on taking a look at botnets, and the interest here eventually is to work with how people are stealing money using your browsers. And what Aditya's been doing is sort of dissecting botnets, and we're going to try and give you a little bit of a sense of what's going on inside those, the latest generation of those. So we're going to start off, we'll talk a little bit about the taxonomy of browser malware. Then we're going to talk about the browser exploit packs. And then so that's what puts the nasty stuff onto your system. The drive-by downloads are what lead you to the browser exploit packs. And then we're going to look at some stuff that we're going to see inside the botnets. So obviously, everything that we've done here is, doesn't relate to stealing things. So first generation botnets, IRC, second generation peer-to-peer, and then we started getting into using the internet protocols. Pretty much what's going on here is the trend that you see here is to try and hide better. And then try and bring in some more sophisticated operations. And not surprisingly, what you see these days is using some combination of these three for, just to make stuff more convenient. So in terms of the taxonomy, there's a few things that we can do here. You can actually put something inside the browser. You can have something that has to do with one of the plugin processes, or, and this is what we're seeing a lot of now, is you can actually start putting some hooks into some of the functions and actually sneak in that way. And that's a lot of what we'll be talking about here today. And the devil is really in the details, and as best as we can in this kind of environment, we're going to try and show you some of the details, at least as far as some of this stuff runs. And as I'm sure many of you know, the details get pretty heavy. Okay, so let's start with the browser exploit packs, which BEPs. I always have trouble getting those to roll off my tongue, all right? And right now, black hole is one of the more prevalent ones. And the idea is, all right, how am I going to load some malware onto your system? And, and the basic idea is that the BEP is going to look at your browser, your Firefox version 8 or IE8 or whatever you're running there, this particular version, and it'll look up and go, oh yeah, okay, I can exploit you with this particular one. And that's pretty much what its job is. Java's handy for doing that, and there's all sorts of support for plugins. They get to be reasonably complex pieces of software, and we'll have these available for you. But there is, some more details of how, in fact, they do that, elsewhere. So there's a picture of some malware for you. I mean, if you're taking the trouble to try and dig into some of this, this is what it looks like. If what you're trying to extract out of that is something that looks a little bit more like code. And again, some details of how we do that. I mean, I could spend all day on this stuff, but we want to get into some other things today. Just as an example, so here's some a variety that is kicking around. Those are all black holes. There are other ones, Phoenix and Redkit. So these are, you know, if you start looking around for some of these exploit packs, there's a variety of them, you know. So what we're going to do is actually show one of these in action. And what I want you to watch for when you're looking at this, and I'll let Aditya show this off to you here, what you want to watch for is, you know, live while this thing is going. We weren't courageous enough to do this actually truly live, so we did a video of it. But watch how many are getting infected while you're watching. And then also, the other thing you want to watch for is what the percentage is. Because one thing that hopefully occurred to you when you're looking at this is that, well, how often, you know, are these guys successful at doing their infections? And you'll see that the infection rates are down largely in the single digits. But because we're doing this across the internet, you will see the number of actual successful infections to be pretty high. So with that. Yeah. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. So this is a demo that we came across, like analyzing some of the phishing attacks that came across in our inboxes. Typically, the last couple of, I think, months, considering the black hole exploit pack and the recent with the Redkit and everything. So you got to say, like, there are a lot of phishing emails coming from AT&T, IRS, and then there's a LinkedIn scam, and so we analyzed a lot of those things. So I came across with an interesting fact, and the idea behind this is that we get an access to one of the statistic page of the live nuclear exploit pack. And the idea is to simply show you that whenever that particular exploit pack is running, what is happening in reality. Maybe it's very easy to say, okay, you got a phishing email, you will get redirected. But when you host that particular exploit pack on a heavy traffic volume website, what actually happens? So that's what this demo actually gives you an idea. And let's take a look at it. So we simply got an access to this URL, and when we accessed it, and we get an idea like all the statistic page of the nuclear exploit pack here. And if you say there's MSI, Microsoft Internet Explorer, Firefox, Opera, Chrome, and every time we refreshed it, the number changes. Because what the actually malware author or the attacker did at that point of time, he hosted this particular exploit pack in one of the high traffic oriented website. Some call it allmyvideos.net. And every user that accessed their website got an infection. Depends on whether that infection was successful or not, but it tried everything. So every time if you see, when we refreshed it, the number changes significantly. And this was like in a time period of like 5 to 8 minutes. And you can get an idea, I mean, if they were running it for like an hour, how many successful infections or how many try or attempts they have already made. And that actually try to only give you an idea. We have some other interesting demos built out of videos will showing some of the other attacks, how the bots actually subvert the system. So this actually gives you an idea like allmyvideos.net was actually infected, and there's another subdomains, and all these are producing a lot of data. So the highest one is like allmyvideos.net. And it's going really fast. The Windows 7 is always, and we say like Windows 7 is pretty secure, but it isn't actually. So it actually gives you how many loads are actually successfully activated and how many systems get exploited with the bot. So that's what just to give you an idea how the browser exploit infections really works. I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Enbody.
So that's the pack that actually loads the goodies onto your machines. How do you get to those? And one of the ways is with, or I should say a popular way now, is with the drive-by download. And basically, you know, what we're trying to do is lead the victim to the exploit pack. You know, once we can get them there, now we can see how we can get them on the machine. How do we get them there? And the basic idea is, you know, an infected website. We get an iframe to direct you to that, and then once we get you to the BEP, then you get the action that we just saw. As we've seen talked about in many other talks here, this whole process may start with something like a phishing email, remember, if you can just convince somebody just for a long enough period of time to hit that click, right? Then, you know, we're off to a web page. We can direct you to the BEP. If you're in that, you know, 5–10% or whatever of that particular brand of browser, we've got you. And again, I guess I should say that yes, we end up doing this in a way that most users aren't going to have a clue as to what just happened. There we go. So there's any number of these frameworks around. We have these, I don't know, did you want to say something about these?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So this one is an anonymous JDB. Like the JDB actually stands for Java Drive-by Framework. And the idea behind it, like anonymous, like they put it that Java framework and it produces all the Java-related jar files and all other sort of templates for you. So what happened actually? I mean, you just have to, this is a kind of crimeware as a service for the underground sellers, and they actually provide it to the users. I mean, they could be any cyber criminal, a normal user, or maybe an ethical business guy who actually wants to run this on a high traffic volume website to get their advertisements on. And so the idea is like, you know, go into the underground community, you know, talk to the guy, talk to the underground seller, get an access to anonymous JDB, just provide some of the details, and you'll get your malicious Java applet ready. And that you can infuse it with your malicious iframe on some compromised domain and get the things done. And this one is another one called as a Java drive-by generator. I think like this is being used at a very heavy scale nowadays with an existence of new Java vulnerabilities. With the last couple of months, you have seen like the black hole is being known heavily for exploiting Java, the JRE, I mean Java runtime environment, you know, hosted on, because it's a platform independent code, it can run on anywhere and you can exploit anything what you want. So it's very simple. You simply go to underground community, pay certain bucks, get the things done, and your malicious code is ready. And you provide like, okay, I want this particular applet to communicate back to my command and control server, and things will be done for you. And you just simply host somewhere, find another crimeware service, and you are typically all done in that case. So that's the concept of drive-by frameworks is. They produce everything for you. You have to just convince the user and get the things done. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the malvertisements. So this actually came from the perspective that when we talk about phishing attacks, we have simple phishing attacks based on broad-based attacks. Then we typically have spear phishing, kind of sort of targeted attacks, comes from the, you know, harnessing the information using social engineering tricks and then targeting a user for a specific organization. But what happened in this particular thing, attackers find another interesting way. I mean, they really don't want to get into the phishing one. Why not to attack the content delivery networks? Because the idea is a sort of distributed attack, a sort of chain reaction. What happened in this particular case, anything that you, in fact, somewhere, some point of time in content delivery network, or maybe there is a secondary network that actually communicate back with the content delivery, any website communicating back with that content delivery network fetches the content from it. And obvious, I mean, if it is infected, it's going to fetch the malicious advertisement. And this one is something like working previously for a company called Armorize, pretty good in doing a web malware analysis. So in this particular case, you look, say, it was a case of some in a pornographic website which is being used, and they did a key analysis for that, and they find that they were actually hosting a malicious advertisement. And that actually goes from this to traffic junkie to etology, syllabus codes, and they'll go from everything, and that's how you serve the exploit. So idea is simply hop from one node to the another. I mean, while doing analysis, you might have only one compromised domain in between where the attackers have actually loaded the iframe, and that actually communicates back with the domain hosting browser exploit pack. But if you look in this eyes, there are many number of hops jump from one to another, and because it's in a world wide web, they are interconnected, and things can get really nasty from that perspective. So phishing attacks, malvertisements, but phishing has been known for a long period of time, but malvertisements are, you know, really working pretty good nowadays, and you can do whatever you want on that case. You want to go ahead, Ben?
Sure. Yeah. So we've shown you a little bit on the exploit pack. how we can do the drive-by downloads to get us there, how we can use the advertisements to maybe get us into an iframe, which can get us into the exploit pack. All right, so what might you do with those? Well, one thing that you can do is, somebody who has written the exploit pack, right, they can, sell their services to install your malware. So you've come up with something that you would like to get installed on a variety of machines, and you contact one of these guys and give them your malware. Maybe it's just a link to it, and they will go ahead and say, all right, whenever somebody hits my exploit pack, I will then upload your malware. And so that's a pay for install type thing, and that's been around for a while. The other way that we can install malware is to have a bot master who, so again, so what is a botnet? It's a collection of infected machines, and the bot master has control of those, and so he can go and say, all right, give me a piece of malware, and I will now go and install it on however many machines that you want to have it installed on. Just a couple of things. They may be the same person, right? So we're seeing one of the things that's been interesting with Aditya's work is that he's gone out and actually looked at this whole hierarchy of an economy that has grown around this. So we always had one person sort of doing the infection and the whole criminal activity, and what we're starting to see is stratification of that, and you get somebody who is maybe creating the BEP, and somebody else who is doing the drive-by downloads, and somebody else doing the malvertisements, and somebody else controlling the botnets, and then you can actually sell some of this stuff to criminals who aren't that technically sophisticated anymore. Right? So we're starting to see a stratification here. So when I talk about these and I say, all right, these are different people, sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't, and we're seeing a stratification in this underground economy. But in any case, they're kind of the sort of different sides of the same coin. Just as an example, there's a nice little GUI, and it's like, okay, I can give you my my URL and go ahead and install this piece of malware. As we saw with some of these, with some of the other pages that Aditya showed you, we're starting to see quite a bit of sophistication in the quality of the tools that are provided here. All right, so what else we have here? Well, at some point, we've got to host some of these things someplace. And how are we going to do that? And again, this ties in because we've got to put our BEP someplace. We might have to be hosting our iframes someplace. We've got to put it someplace. And one thing that's nice to do is to go after virtually hosted sites, because that now, if we can get into one of those, maybe I can get to all of the sites that are being hosted at this particular physical location. So we've got several sites with a single server, and if we can get with one of them, maybe we can get all of them. That allows us to do some uploading sums. We can get a iframe injector in there, and the cookie replay attacks. There's a whole variety of these that we can use to get in there, and now we have a nice place to host our stuff, right? Because we certainly don't want to be paying for this ourselves. As an example, all right, if I'm VPN, it's always a nice way to do things. A popular one is Panama. Why? Well, the cybersecurity laws there are not particularly strong, and so let's do our VPN out of there, and it's it's all very nice. There's a little bit of charge for it. You connect up there, and now I've got a VPN that I can either use as my launching point. Maybe I can use that as my command and control. Just a variety of ways that I can use that. And again, eventually the whole thing, this is just, sort of making myself a little bit more anonymous, a little bit harder to get to. So let's take this a step further. So I've got some bots out there, and what I would like to now do is, what can I do with this? Let's take a look at Ruskill. So what can Ruskill do? So Ruskill can, install malware for us, and it can monitor it, and when things are all done, we can remove all traces. Now, we might be removing traces of a dropper that dropped the malware in, and then we remove the traces of it, and the malware is still there. Or maybe I'm renting, these services out. I will install your malware for some period of time, maybe a week or something like that, and at the end of the week, it will disappear off the botnet. So it's, I might control a bunch of bots, I can rent that out. I can do this install by install that I just showed you a few slides ago, and then a little history of our understanding of the, sort of the history of that particular term. Let's see, I think yes, why don't I let you lead into the demo then?
So, as I talk about like on the Ruskill and provided by Dr. Enbody, the details, the idea behind Ruskill is that half of the idea is not new because you can use a bot to download and execute the file. What the important part in the Ruskill module is, because the name actually came from the Russian malware game, or the Russian game actually known as the Diabolo, and from there is like a game between among the players who is the powerful one. So in this particular concept, the Ruskill not only downloads the malware, but it has the capability monitor as well as tracing the system changes. This is a very interesting one because after the reboot, it can really remove all your application data, which is a temporary one, and remove a lot of other things. And I'll show you in a little bit in a demo, which will actually project you the fact that how a particular bot, we saw this Ruskill module in a dark bot, and that I'll be demoing later on. I'll show you how from using an IRC channel, how we can execute a command based on it. And that's the really interesting fact about Ruskill, is all about the game of power. Who got the power? You can consider it as a concept of bot wars, because like bots are also fighting with each other, like who's gonna get the infected machine. But this is a very advanced module. Some of the functionality is being there, but for the purpose of malware writers, they are really enhancing it. So what we are going to show in Ruskill demo is like, we're gonna install a bot in a VMware. This particular bot, we actually do some reverse engineering and do some binary patching and force the bot to communicating back to our command and control channel that we set up on the IRC. And from the IRC, we're gonna use the commands that we find during reverse engineering, and that will show you how we can simply download a file and execute it. So there's a lot of difference between while only downloading a file and then executing it in the context of the system. And that's what the idea behind Ruskill is. And let's take a look at the demo here. So this is our IRC channel, which we actually set up for maintaining and running this particular demo. And what we are doing right now here is like, we just triggered the IRC client here, and that's where we are going to join the channel on the server, which we stated as an NGR. And you say like, now the talking is NGR, so the session is up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this ngr.exe file here. So just trying to show that this is a legitimate binary. And so what happens when we execute this binary here, it will take a bit of time, and it will melt away. The concept of melting states that, remove the dropper and put me somewhere, the bot says to the dropper. So it actually goes away right here. And within a speck of time, you will see that bot gets connected back to the command and control panel on the IRC channel. So in this way, you say like the bot is somewhere hosted in US, running an XP machine here, and this is a random name of the bot using Windows and built-in cryptographic APIs. So when I run the version command, it gives me an idea that what kind of bot is there, where it is placed, and what kind of capabilities it has. So what I did actually here So it is gone. So I use a command called as baja here, used by this bot. And I paste the URL from it's from the putty and enables the Ruskill module here. So I run that command by enabling the Ruskill module, and on the VMware machine, it downloads the file and executes the putty for you. And you can do this process as many times as you can. And because this is an inbuilt capability of the bot, so just download and execute it. But it has an additional functionality, which I cannot show right now because of the time constraints. So it can remove all the traces after the execution of a file, like removing the registry entries and sort of things like that. And you can keep on trying it and keep on fetching the binary from remote resources and executing it in the VMware. So that's the capability of Ruskill is right now. So next, going to take a DNS changer. Okay. So this is another interesting capability. Like, if you have seen on the media outlets for the last couple of months, you must have gone through a lot of media news and media articles that are actually talking about DNS changer. So the concept is, if we are not doing a DNS cache poisoning vulnerability or not exploiting that vulnerability on the server side, so how the malware actually doing the DNS manipulation on the client side? That's the concept is, and that's the question that we really need to answer. So a different way. So there are many ways you can do the DNS manipulation on the client side. And we're going to go one by one, and then we'll see how the present-day botnets, called as third generation, like SpyEye, Zeus, Andromeda, Darkbot, and other set of bots, how they actually exploit the DNS functionality on the victim machines. So very simple one is everybody going to talk about replace the entries in the etc host file. Pretty easy, can be easily detectable. You simply open the file in an editor and get the things done. Okay, this particular IP, like for example, Facebook is redirected to this particular malicious domain. To some extent, it's pretty fine. Another interesting one is like the executes DNS amplification attack. This is actually the attackers try to attack a small local area networks with having like routers. They try to manipulate the router addresses, the DNS entries. So from the other perspective of a network, if the gateway capability of resoluting the DNS address is exploited, so any nodes or any like secondary machines that are connecting back to the router will also get a DNS amplification. But that actually depends upon the concept of having some vulnerability in the routers itself. So now how the present-day botnets are doing it, again, it's the concept of hooking, but how they hook the DNS, that we're going to take a look. So the first one is hooking DNS API. So as we know that in Windows, we have a DNS API.lib and DNS API.dll library. And that particular library exports some sort of function like DNS query. So whenever your browser opens up and a user forces the browser to trigger or open up the facebook.com website, so this particular call is executed in the system, and then actually resolutes your DNS address and provides you IP address, and then you can connect back through the Ethernet frames and all that. But what happens, since your system is already exploited and bot has the capability of hooking, it actually hooks that DNS query function. So what it does, I'll be going to demonstrate in a bit of time. Another interesting one is hooking DNS cache resolver. We need caches, because of the fact that we don't want to every time forces the browser to go and query the DNS server if that entry is present in cache and just fetch it from there. In that case, there is a send-to function is called in like Windows ws2_32.dll. And so the bot, what the bot actually does, it actually verifies that function. If it is called, it says there is a way the browser is actually connecting or using the cache resolver service to get the DNS mapping. But that's not the case. How that is, let's take a look. So in this particular demo, like the video that we have made, so the system is already infected with the NGR or the Darkbot that we have demonstrated earlier. So we are using DNS Changer will block two sites, Microsoft and Facebook. But when we tried using attempt to redirect from google.com to some other malicious domain, it didn't get redirected actually. So there is always a problem with DNS client-side attacks too. Sometimes it goes awry and things will not be in a fine place. So let's take a look at this particular, So idea is simple. Like I came across with some of the POCs made by some of the companies. Like for example, they put like 9 iframes in your one web page, and they try to load like Microsoft.com antivirus website like Kaspersky. And if it's not get loaded in the iframe, you might have a problem like you have infected with DNS Changer. And let's take a look at with this particular demo here. So again, the system is already connected back to the IRC channel. And I just ran the version command here and get all the info. So the system is already infected. The first what I'm trying to show you is that here in this particular demo, that when we try to open browser and queries for the Microsoft.com, the address actually gets resoluted, and you get the Microsoft.com and Facebook actually successfully open in your browser. Since we made it custom, so we have to close the browser right now. And then what we're doing right now is we are using the change DNS command and this particular bot to block the Microsoft.com. So it says like this particular bot, the DNS is blocked. And we issue another interesting command for change DNS to Facebook.com. So you say, it gives us a message like notification that even the Facebook is blocked. So when we open another instance of Mozilla browser and we try to open, it is blocked. And again for the Facebook, it is again blocked. So it's a dynamic hooking into the DNS library functions that what this bot is actually using. Even on the try, we try to attempt, because we made this bot, we did some reverse engineering tactics and we customize it. But when we try to do the redirection here with change DNS command to some law, for example, malware.com. When I try to open google.com here, it simply goes sorry. I mean, it didn't find that one up because there is some problem with the DNS hooking with this bot due to our customization. But it still, do not allow you to get an access to the google.com. And you can manipulate these things as many times as you can in your way order. So this is actually a concept of DNS Changer that what the media is typically talking about for the last couple of months. I'm going to hand Dr. Enbody about man in the browser.
Okay, so we've told you a little bit about the bots and how we get the malware on there and some of the capabilities. What I'm going to show you now is the moneymaker, right? So this is how you rob a bank. And we're doing it online. Willie Sutton said, when asked, why do you rob banks, and that's where the money is. Well, now it's online, and so what I'm going to show you here is the way that once we have infected the browser, how am I going to actually get some money out of this? And so we've got the user over here, we've got the web server. Think of this as being the bank, and here's the bad guy. And this is the man in the browser. So you've heard of a man-in-the-middle attack. Well, really, this is a man-in-the-middle attack that is happening inside the browser. And so here's the process. I apologize. The font's probably small for you to see, but I'll talk you through the words, and you can follow along with the pictures. So here's my user. And he asks for the bank web page or a Fidelity page or whatever financial institution might be there. Now, when that page comes back, the man in the browser will have hooked the functions that the browser is trying to use, and in this case is going to inject some data into the page before it gets displayed. Right. Like maybe you'll ask for some extra information. And at this point, and they may not have had to inject data, okay? I mean, we'll see there's two things that we're going to do. One is to actually inject something to change the page and maybe add some extra fields in there. Yeah, I'd like to get your social security number or whatever. The other is I'm going to do form grabbing, where I'm going to just get the credentials off of the page. And the neat thing that we'll see about form grabbing is, unlike key logging where you get all the characters, form grabbing, you're going to grab stuff right off the form, and guess what? It's labeled for you. Like, here is the password, and here is the account number, and so on. And so what happens is, so the page gets delivered, it comes through, I may, at that point, inject some extra material into the page, and then I'm going to split what's coming out. I'm going to grab the information, like maybe the information out of the form, maybe the information out of the extra stuff that I added in there, and at the same time, under its normal operation, so the user doesn't see anything going on, the web page will be, the request will be sent to the server. That'll come back, and the user now sees, whatever, they get to do their banking transactions and so on, and everything looks fine. So I showed two things that could be done. One is add some extra fields in here by injecting things. Second thing is steal stuff out of the forms as they go by. The third thing I can do is when I inject information here is I can actually possibly put transactions, like transfer money from one account to another account. If I've done that, I'll want to clean up the pages as they come back through. So that's man in the browser. That's how I get credentials. And then, of course, at some point, I have to turn those credentials into money. And it may be that I return to that underground market that I talked about before. It's like, oh, here's some credentials. Please turn them into cash. Just as an example, so this would be an example that actually Chase posts as, watch out for this. And here's a case where we have a legitimate page, and on top of that, we ask for some extra information. Now, any of you, if you saw this, all the alarms would go off, right? But, while you're logged into the account, oh, by the way, give me a social security number, driver's license, date of birth, everything, shoe size, whatever we want, all of you, the alarms would go off. But there's a sufficient number of people that would go ahead and fill that in. So that's just a real example of this type of attack that's out in the wild. So this process of injecting is what's called web injects, because we've got web pages and we're injecting stuff into it. And so as that web page comes into the browser, we're going to manipulate that web page. And, like as we saw there, maybe put a pop-up, maybe add some extra input, whatever it is. One of the restrictions that we have on this is that this is a very static kind of attack. And one of the things we believe is that we don't think it's possible to really make this a dynamic attack. So ahead of time, you have to decide, all right, this is what the Chase Bank page looks like. And then I'm going to specify, all right, if you see this in a Chase Bank page, then make this particular modification to the page and display it. So this is, there's a static file on there, which I think yeah, there it is, the webinjects.txt file that is part of the attack. That has to actually be set up ahead of time, and that provides some limitations to what can be done here. And if you look at that file, it will say, all right, put this information before this particular field, or put this information after this particular field, and it will only do it on a particular page served up from a particular institution. So these are very directed attacks. They're very specific, but they are out there in the wild. And I don't know. Why don't you explain the actual ones there?
So these are some of the attacks that have been conducted against live banks. So if you get an idea, this one has done a forceful cookie injection in Citibank's website. So what they actually did, like during the build time, like they have a builder. So with the advent of third generation botnets, we have a building component that actually builds a bot for you. So they design like the attacker ahead of time sits in front of the bank website and try to fetch like different patterns out of it. Then the attacker actually used that patterns to design a one webinjects.txt file or any name he can give. And that particular file is passed to the builder, and the builder actually used that pattern rules and put that content in a binary format in the bot itself. So we compromised one of the domains somewhere and used SPI and things like that. And so got across with this interesting web inject. So it says like set URL for webdaus.citibank.com. Look for the data before, if there is a data before, like this kind of thing, inject this complete script into it, which is a cookie injection. I mean, it's gonna generate a false cookie for it. And there is a pretty interesting attack, and Citibank knows about it, like some of the bots have actually done that. Well, it is not only restricted to one particular bank. This has been going around for like different institutions here. So if you look at this one is for like HTML content in Bank of America website. So what the bot actually did here, it actually injects label, if you see, and asks for the ATM number. This one is again a live target, live attack. And it's not restricted only to Bank of America. We have enough for like Wells Fargo too. And they are also looking for the ATM PIN and the password, which has been injected some like in an unauthorized manner in some of the web pages where even that kind of information is not even required. But these kind of attacks are running in the wild, and it's significantly harder for the people or the security team, because they believe that while they sell their banking services, we have an SSL protection, we give you TFA, we give you a lot of things like that. But this kind of issues are cropping up, and the servers are, like the banking security teams are not paying much attention because they feel like this is not their problem. This is a problem of the end user. Okay, go ahead and get the antivirus done, but antivirus cannot, find and fetch these kind of problems here. We're going to talk about form grabbing.
Sure. So I mentioned form grabbing here. Here's the process in a little more detail. So I've got my user. They send a request to the server, comes back, they start to fill in the forms. And at that point, there's a post, and what will happen is I will have hooked into one of the functions that's processing that. That will allow me to look at the form, grab the data, take that data, ship it off to my server. At that point, I will now release the hook. It goes back to the normal running of the handling of the form with the post, and then that goes off to the server, and the user is unaware of that. And again, it comes out of this business of hooking into the function. So when they go to do the post, we just insert ourselves right there, grab the information, let control go back at that point, and nobody's any wiser that we've done that. But again, there are certain, it turns out that there are certain restrictions on what can be done with this kind of attack. But one thing to notice here is that why doesn't encryption work? It's like, oh, isn't my communication with the bank all encrypted? Well, yes, it is, but I grabbed that information before that happened. Remember, this is me in the browser, so I'm grabbing that, and yes, we can do all my SSL and everything. That's all after the fact. I'm already done. I've already gotten my information, handed control back, and away it goes. Let's see. So, and just, I think I've already talked about everything on that page. So what we're going to do is we've got yet another demo here for you, and what what we're showing here is this is what the criminal or whoever is grabbing this. This is the kind of information that they get out of that, and there's all sorts of good stuff, including IDs and passwords and all of that. And another demo, you can take it away.
So this actually demo came from the practices while we were analyzing some of the malware domains, and we came across with interesting fact, like some of the vulnerabilities that were present in that particular malicious domain. So on exploitation of those vulnerabilities, some weak passwords or launching some brute force attacks, we got an access to that command and control panel. So what we did actually, so we were also analyzing some of the other things, got an access to the bot, and it's pretty interesting, like because bot is communicating back to that command and control server. So it's really good to run that bot in an emulator in our virtual machine to get the things done. And the idea is simple, try to look at how the form grabbing actually works here. So I'm going to explain this demo. So this demo was constructed again using like an ICE bot, which is actually a descendant of Zeus. Like the guy who actually wrote this particular bot uses some of the concepts from the Zeus actually, and he actually optimizes some of the web injects and form grabbing things, the way it hooks, and to came across with this interesting bot. So again, the concept is we have a new VMware machine here, and we have a sample of ICE bot here. So again, when I'm going to run this bot, this particular dropper, it's going to extract the bot somewhere in the system. And again, melting process, because dropper going to kill itself with having an embedded some sort of Windows batch script, and it kills itself, your system gets infected. So what I'm showing here is the IP address of my system is this one. And this is the CNC that we got an access to, and when we're logging into it, we submit that we get this like simple machine. It actually having an like concentration of bots up to like 9 or 10 in number, not much in that. So idea here is that try to show you that this particular VMware machine is infected with ICE bot, and this is our IP, and it automatically gets connected back to that command and control panel here. This is our IP. So the system is infected, it's in a ready state to communicate back with the command and control. So what we are going to do now, consider yourself as a legitimate user. I mean, my system is infected. I'm going to open a chase.com website here. I'm not going to use the real credentials, but I'm just trying to show you that this process works in this way. And I put like wrong user ID and some of the rock password here, and I click the submit button. And the idea for showing Facebook.com is like these kind of attacks are not only directed towards banks. It can be any website or anything. So I also supplied some of the raw credentials here, and I submit the button, submit the form actually. So because it's not a legitimate one, so we get an error that it will not be processed by the servers. And now let's get back to the command and control, and I'm going to try to look at the reports. And there you see we get an access to HTTPS, the chase.com website here, the logs actually. And this is what like the botnet has an ICE 9 version 1.20, this is XP Service Pack 2, and all those things here. And this is how you get all the form requests here. So because all this request is being posted by the legitimate browser, and that what bot hooks it, and there you got the password and the other things. And that is very legitimate. I mean, in the same way when you do transaction, do any sort of thing, and that works pretty fine. But so another interesting fact with these kind of bots are when the malware authors design this bot, they try to put up a time constraint. Like they only want the bot to connect back to the command and control server after a time lag of 10 minutes, like 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and things like that. And after that, the command and control panel updated the database and things like that. So in this case, we got a Facebook request too, and that is this one is here is our email and a password. And that actually a concept based on form grabbing is like you can map this kind of functionality or this kind of attack to a banking website you're providing your credentials and things like that. Your system is infected, this thing is going to happen. And
yeah, I mean, so one of the things that we think we have figured out here is, as with most things, this is an arms race. You have your attackers do something, we the defenders do something else in response. We actually believe that with this type of attack that there are enough restrictions on what the attackers can do, as slick as it is, that we actually think that in sort of an asynchronous warfare kind of analysis, that the defenders will actually be able to we'll actually be able to get ahead of the attackers on this flavor of man-in-the-browser attacks that are using this hooking. And yeah, I guess open it up for questions.
idea behind is this, I think I know that this question is going to be asked. The concept is, for the antivirus, they actually based on the concept of signature-based detection. So there is always a time gap. The very first thing is till the time they discover the malware, they are going to build a signature for it, things are done. Let's say they still build the signature, but there's a lot of obfuscation techniques we have based on polymorphic encryption and other sort of things, which actually changes the instruction inside a binary and rotates it within a iteration, which becomes significantly harder for the antivirus to detect it. And that's what the idea is. They are still running protection against those kind of bots whose signatures has already been detected previously. But with the concept of latest generation, for example, zero-day attacks, zero-day vulnerabilities, and some other things, you can use this particular bot and wrap it inside of some sort of polymorphic encryptor or encoder, which will be significantly harder for them to find a way. Another part is it's really hard to detect the inline hooking in the browsers because it uses a built-in concept of Microsoft Windows called as hot patching. Patch the first 5 bytes in the function epilogue and it becomes hard for them. To some extent, for assurance purposes, antivirus engines are fine, but these are not. They cannot prevent you from man in the browser. They cannot prevent you from web injects. They cannot prevent you from form grabbing unless they find that your system is infected. But till that point, systems are still way ahead. So